them out. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah.
Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with the hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna lose, and who the ball. So listen to.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. Welcome to episode 413 of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab radio show and podcast. The show that's covering the sporting HBCU dash for all things HBCU sports for institutions large and small. From NIA to the NCAA, we share insights and information on the HBCU sports culture, HBCU athletic aesthetics to facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs in the business of HBCU sports. I'm your host, Dr. Cavil, along with my co-host, Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. Mike Washington is out on assignment, but none other than Charles is here. We're filming from our home studio and sending a signal live to Caseway Store 30 AM studios with the Texas Radio Hall of Famer Ralph Cooper in the beautiful home of Texas Southern University from Houston, Texas. Charles, how you doing today?
Doing well, Doc. Doing well. Eternal. When we're taking a look at these season previews as we head into various media days, CIAA Media Day today and MEAG Media Day tomorrow. SWAC is next week. Doc, I even picked up my copy of Dave Campbell's football magazine, which you know here in Texas, that's the Bible. So we're right around the corner from football season.
Yeah, you know when you get a copy of it, it's for real. I got mine and ready to give it to you. But we're going to give you a tie-in with the CIAA second segment, third segment. We're scheduled to have Dr. Foster, Winston-Salem State alumni undergrad, did his doctorate at Texas A&M, but now he's currently at the University of Kansas. Does a lot of research on HBCU. So we're going to share one of his last research projects that really excited me among with a lot of his other works. We're going to get a chance to talk about that a little bit. But before we get into that, I wanted to talk about the fact that I got to visit Elizabeth City State. I'm down here, and Dr. Banks, Corey Banks, does a lot of work with the MEAC, obviously with Norfolk State, where he's a professor. Many knives, if you would, many tools in his sheds in terms of what he gets done. Faculty athletic representative, far as many people know about it. Also recently elected to his department as the chair, negotiating all that parts of it. So that's another story. But he took me out last night. Had to get a chance to go down to Elizabeth City, where he's from, visit Elizabeth City State University, and somebody obviously that is alumni there, graduated there. So I got to see the insight, the old and the new. Walked in the gym, got a chance to talk with the AD, the coach, women's basketball coach that won the championship. Got to talk with her, got some pictures. So I was all in it. Hall of Fame, really nice opportunity to see that. So I wanted to shout out Dr. Banks and all those Elizabeth City State fans, alumni, and supporters. With that being said, Charles, what you got in terms of CIAA? What's the news in the landscape?
Sure. Well, let's take a look at it. The Central Intercollegiate Athletic Association unveiled their 2023 all CIAA preseason football team as voted by the CIAA football coaches and sports information directors, and the predicted order of finish as selected by the head football coaches. So let's take a look at that. First, we start off by the 2023 team features 18 returning players from the 2022 All-CIAA team, including 7 first-teamers led by CIAA leading rusher Jada Byers of Virginia Union and the CIAA Offensive Rookie of the Year, Isaiah Freeman. So let's take a look at the predicted order of finish. Fayetteville State and Bowie State are predicted to represent the South and the Northern divisions, respectively. Coming in at 3 is Virginia Union, 4 Shaw, Virginia State is 5, Johnson C. Smith at 6, Winston-Salem State at 7, Elizabeth City State 8, Bluefield State 9, Lincoln, Pennsylvania at 10, Livingstone 11, and St. Augustine comes in at 12. So that's the predicted order of finish in the CIAA.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Hey, as I was riding back with Dr. Banks to get ready and prep for the show, I obviously got a chance to talk to Lynn Thompson as he's doing his work, and get a chance to probably go sit down and have dinner with both of them. I'm getting insight, but man, they're putting in some work. They're doing some things down here in the MEAC are quietly moving the muscle, getting things done. It's been exciting again to be up here in the MEAC territory. And I tell you what, these MEAC folks, we do our thing. I'm from the SWAC, all that kind of stuff. But when you come up there, we always talk about the hospitality we have in this SWAC in the South, SIAC, but it does not defeat the purpose up here in the MEAC. They take care of it.
That's all right.
They respect what you're doing. They take care of you. So that's all you can have, which is, end of the day, what we talk about the HBCU Sporting Diaspora. Talking about the Sporting Diaspora, we have these independent programs in terms of Tennessee State and OVC, and most recently over the last couple of years, Hampton, and what is now known formally as the Colonial Athletic Association. They have changed their name in terms that, so that's going to be interesting when you talk about the CAC. What are your thoughts on that, Charles?
Pretty smart branding opportunity to now that you have a couple of HBCUs within the ranks to sort of rebrand the conference, expand that geographic footprint, if you will, and now they are no longer the Colonial Athletic Association. So now they are the Coastal Athletic Association. So keep the CAA, but a little change from the Colonial there. Pretty smart.
Coastal Athletic Association or the Coastal Athletic Conference. Pretty smooth in terms of the name they chose. So you keep part of the brand to be fair and upfront with that. The CAA, I think ESPN had it the CAC in terms of Coastal Athletic Conference, but my understanding is still Coastal Athletic Association in terms of CAA. So get that out there. As you said, it's tough in these modern times to be using Colonial out there in terms of your signature name. So credit to them in terms of making the change. What better time as you diversify your program institutions, particularly when we talk about, in this framework, historically white colleges, which they all house, but now 2 HBCU. So fascinating, good move. We'll see what that means as we move forward. With that, I'm going to chop it back up to you, Charles. What else you have on your menu in terms that has you excited this time of the year in terms of athletic news out there?
Yeah, well, Alabama State basketball player was named SWAC Woman of the Year. So let's get into that. The Southwestern Athletic Conference has named Alabama State basketball player Ayanna Emanuel as the SWAC Woman of the Year. Last season, Emanuel was the leading scorer in the league during conference play. She averaged 16.9 points per game in league action. Her stellar play helped propel Alabama State to a 12-6 mark in conference play. For her efforts, she was named the 2022-2023 SWAC Woman of the Year. So kudos to Ayanna Emanuel for capturing this award here in the SWAC.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Good information in terms of what you got there. With that, we're going to go into our break. I know there's some good things out there. Maybe we'll get a chance to talk about it on the back end of the show and get your thoughts on some of the additional news, where things are heading. But with that being said, let's get into our first break. We'll come back on the other side, and we'll bring Dr. Foster, Savion Foster, into the fold and see what his thoughts and how he is going to talk about it. I guess we'll get a chance to ask him, first of all, before we get too far into it, what is his thoughts of Winston-Salem State being selected 7th overall, if I'm not correct, if I am correct, in terms of overall ranking, and 4th in the Southern Division. We got to ask him a little bit about his thoughts on that. But stay tuned. We'll be right back after this first break.
Stride K-12 powered schools are ready to put over 20 years of being a leader in online education to work for you. Dive into curriculum designed for the online classroom. Team up with state-certified teachers trained in virtual instruction. Take control of your child's education journey. Discover the power of personalized learning with a leader experienced in preparing kids for a future they can be excited about. Take charge. Stride K-12. Enroll now for the fall. Stride K-12 powered schools are ready to put over 20 years of being a leader in online education to work for you. Dive into curriculum designed for the online classroom. Team up with state-certified teachers trained in virtual instruction. Take control of your child's education journey. Discover the power of personalized learning with a leader experienced in preparing kids for a future they can be excited about. Take charge. Stride K-12. Enroll now for the fall.
The human voice has always connected audiences with experiences. Major brands all across America have trusted Cavil's voice time and time again. Conversational, powerhouse, intelligent, and sincere. That's the voice you need for your creative marketing process. KeaversVoice.com. Cavil's Voice, Cavil's Voice, CavilsVoice.com. Always on, all the time.
Press the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna lose, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
Make sure. This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. As we said, Mike Washington is out on assignment. I don't know. I think he's throwing some curveballs, getting some things done, but he says he's working. But Savon, I'm not sure about that. He kind of disappears. But what's amazing to me, he always, first of the month, he makes sure that his hand's out there. I don't get this, man. But I guess, you know, when you're faculty, you just kind of come and go, you know. If you ain't on the administrative side, you just slip and slide. You know what it is. Some folks like yourself, Dr. Foster. Charles, you see what we do. You can relate. Clinical professor. You getting around here in adjunct status as he works towards his doctor. But let me do this correct. Savon Foster, PhD, is an assistant professor who joined KU. That's Kansas University of Kansas, for those that don't know. Sport management faculty in fall of 2022. Prior to joining the faculty at Kansas, Dr. Foster worked across multiple sectors across the sport industry and higher education. His experiences range from equipment management, facility operations, sports retail, and fan services. To note, he served as an admission counselor and career preparation counselor at the University of Pittsburgh, as well as marketing intern, equipment, game day operations, personnel for Florida A&M University and Winston-Salem State University, respectively. Don't let him fool you. He is a researcher. He is getting it done often and early. I like to see that. Research one institution, AAU as well. So, you know, they don't just take anybody there. So he's getting it done. Dr. Foster has published scholarships in journals across the field, such as Sociology, a Sport Journal, Journal Issues in the Intercollegiate Athletics, Innovative Higher Education, and the Journal of Athletic Development Experience. He has also presented research in multiple national, international, if you would, conferences, notable the North American Society of Sports Management and the College Sports Research Institute, where I've come across and met him a couple of times, as well as going back to Texas A&M when I was trying to get into Texas Southern University, coming out there, but we weren't ready for that. So he took his talent somewhere else. Hopefully, as we move forward, before he falls in love with that money, maybe we can get him back at Texas Southern, or at least in the HBCU sphere. But he's on the climb, so we have to see what that looks like. But we'll talk about some of his research in a minute. With that being said, welcome to the show, Dr. Foster.
Thank you, Dr. Cavil. It's an honor to be on. You know, me and you, we always have a good relationship. We always chop it up good, so I'm glad to be able to contribute.
Man, a pleasure. I see you representing Omega Psi Phi.
Yes,
you know,
sir. Yes,
these
sir.
are Alpha brothers on this side, so we're gonna let you make Charles tell it.
Yes, indeed. We will extend the brotherly arms to you today.
Oh man, I appreciate it. You know, I got the good bros. You know, they brought me in, took care of me once I got the KC. So any chance I get to represent,
nice.
we'll do so.
That's what it's about. That's what I want to hear. Good stuff. Good stuff. With that being said, before we again get a little more into this research, just have a little fun. We're gonna allow folks to tell you where you're actually from, where you went to undergrad, and a little bit about your academic experience. But as we say this, we open up the show talking about CIAA Media Day. You know, they had Winston-Salem State 7th overall and 4th in the Southern Division. What are your thoughts on that?
Man, so one of the things I love about Winston is, you know, we don't let the rankings get to us. Clearly our basketball team, we jumped up, we stepped up, catch people, we caught people off guard when we won the CIAA, I believe like 2 years ago. A lot of folks counted us out, but we did what we needed to do. And when it comes to Winston football, I came in when we won the CIAA in 2012. So, I was there during a great period for Winston, and again, we smack a couple teams in the mouth, and pretty much we start rolling, and everyone else is gonna have to worry about us. So, I'm feeling good. Ranked 7th, ranked 4th, in the division, that's nothing.
I like that. You slid that little basketball in there. I noticed. Yeah, y'all won it last year. Won the tournament. I understand. Yeah. He's like, we a basketball school.
Oh, we basketball.
You Kansas basketball as well.
Yeah, I mean, with Winston, you never know. Like, any team has the opportunity to come up and shock a little bit of everybody. So, we're doing good.
Charles, you want to get in here with any update before I ask him where he's from and let him share that with the people?
I was curious, what was your experience like at Winston?
So for me, I was an out-of-state student. I wasn't from the region. So I'm originally from the Midwest, but my family's from the deep South of Mississippi. So being out North Carolina wasn't a shock to me, but it was great to be down there, being a state that has multiple HBCUs, a culture that's pretty prevalent. So being able to not just be in Winston-Salem and see Winston grads, but seeing A&T grads, Shaw grads, people who just went to HBCUs, and how within our community, we'll talk trash while we're in school, but at the end of the day, we support all HBCUs. So it's pretty cool to be in such a big state and be able to have that. Academically, I had a great experience. I was a sport management major in undergrad. Our program coordinator, he's a legend. He's a living legend at Winston, Dr. Dennis Felder. And, they just created a great experience for me. Academically, socially, professionally, I just had a great time. So, no regrets.
What part of Mississippi are you people from?
Meridian, Mississippi.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Man, so you good. You good now if you don't know he's from Mississippi.
Oh, yeah. Anytime run across Mississippi folks, it's just like we immediately click.
That's what it is.
Yeah, that's real talk. That's real talk. But all kidding aside, Professor Bishop is really on top of it. Good person. With that being said, you said the Midwest, but where are you from?
So I'm originally from Columbus, Ohio. So I grew up dead smack middle of Columbus, maybe about 10 minutes or so away from Ohio State. So growing up, all I really knew was OSU for a long time. I mean, if you're from Columbus, that's basically all you know. So I didn't really get exposed to HBCUs until right before I got into high school. And I got to see something drastically different than, like OSU's campus, like the Ohio Dominicans and other schools that were in the Columbus area. But again, Ohio only has 2 HBCUs, and both of them were at least an hour away. So I really didn't have that deep level exposure, which is why being in North Carolina meant so much. Being able to be around so many schools. I mean, just between you had Winston, Livingstone, St. Aug, A&T, just all of these schools within an hour and a half. And it's just like, man, I can go to any campus and see people that are at similar institutions having the same experience. So I think for me, that's what I was looking for. And then once I got the opportunity, I just dove head first. My little sister did the same thing. She just graduated from Livingstone. So, we're starting a tradition in the family where going to an HBCU is a thing. So I have 2 little cousins that are graduating soon. So I'm already in their ear like, hey, if you want to go to Winston, you can do so. But also I live in KC. So if you want to go to Lincoln, you're like 2 hours away. I can look out for you. You can come crash at the crib, do those types of things.
I like it. That's what's up. With that being said, you talked about the culture and connectiveness, and North Carolina with all the HBCUs among Alabama. You have a lot of HBCUs in the area, particularly when you go between the public and private. Most out there, and it's fascinating because when you're in that region, just how close folks are with the states, and you see that with the CIAA basketball tournament, how they talk about that, how that is like a collective homecoming for all the institutions.
Oh yeah,
and definitely. So when we talking with Jay Walker, who was here earlier before we got out, and he's asking where you're going because we supposed to connect this evening too. Yeah. To kind of do a little bit of homework, relax before we get into everything tomorrow. But to shout out to Dr. Banks and shout out to Lynn Thompson as they are members of Kappa Alpha Psi. And obviously got Roy in the background, Phi Beta Sigma. And so it's unique when you talk about that culture and how, yeah, you have your fraternity along with the sororities, but when you get out to it, that brotherhood that exists on your campus and how all those work together is fascinating. Because we took a ride, literally 40 minutes away, 35 miles away, and you're in the next state and you're at Elizabeth City State. And so Jay Walker's like, man, where you go? How? That's, that's hours away. I said, no, he said 40 hours, 45. I don't know. So he asked Lynn, and Lynn said, yeah, that's about 35 minutes.
Yeah. No, I mean, like that was something that was a culture shock to me, just being in North Carolina. People will pull up. Like, freshman year was a little tough. We didn't have cars, but the moment we started having cars on campus, it's like, all right, we got to go to Livingstone. We're going to go to St. Aug. We're going to go down to Charlotte, kick it at Johnson C. Smith. And it was one of those things that, we would go on campus. We would wear our gear. So, we'll have on Winston gear, stuff like that. We're going to a game. And it's just like a deeper level of like family. Like, it's almost like every game is like a family reunion or, you're kicking it with folks, like it feels like you're back home. And, that's something that I appreciate. And even now, when I've traveled around, I've gone to Prairie View. And, I've been able to hang out on their campus and feel, right at home. Been able to do the same thing, Texas Southern. And then even now, I've gone down to Lincoln, had a good time, and I'm making plans to go to Langston. There's a lot of KC people that go to Langston that have gone to Langston. So that Kansas City connection, me and a couple friends are just going to hop in the car, go down, and just have a good time. So, again, I feel like you can't do that with every type of institution, but with HBCUs, it's definitely doable.
I'll put it right now. Before we get in there, and I'll just jump in there, I'm going to throw back a little history. There was a point in time where Langston and Lincoln, the presidents, happened to both be members of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. And they were going to make the move. Lincoln was already Division II and moved away from NIA. Langston was going to move from NIA and go to Division II. And they got an invitation to join the SIAC. So there's going to be extension. They left their presidency and the new presidents came in, didn't like the idea, so they transitioned back out. But think about how that would have worked in terms of moving forward, how if history would have moved in a different direction, Lincoln and Langston would have been outposts of the SIAC.
Yeah, that would have been great. I mean, just thinking about how, even now there's a huge KC connection between both of those schools, and just the people coming in, those games, you have friends from high school or from the neighborhood. Y'all went to different schools. You build in that rivalry from people who are just from the area. It'll be a nice experience. It would have been a nice experience.
So, Charles, you wanted to jump back in?
Yeah, I was saying I can absolutely relate. Going to Jackson State, being kind of centrally located within the SWAC, but it was nothing for a weekend trip, especially down to New Orleans, Xavier, Dillard, and all those schools down there, or you go 3 hours up here, go to Grambling, or bank it down to Southern, and of course a bunch of us will head up to Russ. You definitely get that familial aspect there. In terms of once you got a car, he couldn't keep you on campus on the weekend. So.
Oh yeah, it's such a different experience. My little sister, she got her car earlier in her college career than I did. And every time I called her, she was somewhere else. And I'm like, I'm so glad, because she was in college during COVID. I'm like, I'm so glad you're getting the experience that I had in college, because now she's starting grad school. She's doing a dual degree program at UNCG in North Carolina A&T in their social work program. But she's already going in knowing people. She's in Greensboro. She knows folks, and it's not just folks from Livingstone. It's just the fact that she bounced around and hung out with people and built those relationships. So, I'm just incredibly happy for her. Again, it's just something unique about our space to where we can do that for each other.
That is unique. One of the first things when I moved out, took my first job up there in Huntsville, Alabama, as Charles alluded to, it wasn't anything, a single thought. In Perth, Texas, we do travel, but you're probably going up to Dallas. But really, a place we travel to in regards to the HBCU would obviously be Houston to Texas Southern and then Baton Rouge to Southern. But we didn't go really beyond that other than Bayou Classic from New Orleans, where you got a chance to do Grambling. When I was in Huntsville, it wasn't anything. I was up there in Nashville, Tennessee State, South Carolina State, over there in Mississippi, Jackson State, down to Alabama State. We'd run over there and see the private schools if you want a little more of that. We went into Atlanta, But you're right, to get around Miles College, Tuskegee, and it wasn't anything 3 hours. You had your choice of HBCUs you want to go and see what the thing of the day, whether it's homecoming, some type of spring fest, or like you said, just go visiting some brother if you're in a Greek organization, or cousins if you had them in the area was another thing.
Sure.
With that, let's get into our first break. We'll come back on the other side and we'll actually get into some of the dialogue that we really wanted to get into in terms of this research. We'll get a chance to get into a research paper particularly. I know you got a lot of them, and we'll talk about some for those that are into that and want to go read some of the research. But we're going to take a little bit of time to look at, you got to be there, a thematic context analysis of historically Black college, university, and sporting experience. And before we end, want to make sure we share the latest research that it looks like you're going to be able to take on that will have you at various homecomings as a little tease coming up this fall. So stick with us. We'll be right back with this break. We'll come back on the other side and we'll have a little more time to talk to Dr. Foster and get in a little bit of this research that our listeners really love, because they get into the business side of this and now they get a chance to move beyond our fandom, as it is that time of the year and we should be excited for football. And we'll take that back to the rightful mantle tomorrow morning as we get into the MEAC after doing the CIAA thing today, and then obviously next week with the SWAC. But before we get inundated with our fandom and who's going to do this and that, we're going to give you a little bit more on the research side and have you understand some of those experiences that we just talked about. Stick with us. Be right back after this break.
Are you hungry for authentic Caribbean food like jerk chicken, oxtail, red snapper, shrimp, tofu, and rasta pasta? Well, find your way over to Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, 180 Auburn Avenue, right next to Royal Peacock in downtown Atlanta.
Them belly full, but we hungry.
Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, open daily from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. And on Friday and Saturday, we're open till 4 a.m. Come to Mango's and put some spice in your life.
So we've got a good thing going.
Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, 180 Auburn Avenue, right next to Royal Peacock in downtown Atlanta. For more info or directions, call 404-698-3992 or log on to mangoscaribbeanrestaurant.com. For instant coupons, text MANGOS to 313131.
Tell your mama hungry, papa hungry, brother hungry.
Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, authentic Caribbean cuisines.
Open up the door, tell your mama hungry.
Press the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna lose, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. We have our visiting guest here today. That is none other than Dr. Savon Foster, currently assistant professor at the University of Kansas, but with his roots at Winston-Salem State University in terms of his undergraduate studies. With that, I told you before we left, we're going to talk about one of his research papers that really stood out to me among many. You got to be there. A thematic content analysis of historically Black college university sporting experience. I'm going to keep it salient. I'm just going to read this abstract, and then we'll come in here and have some dialogue about that. To get people understanding the overall framework of this study, the college sports landscape is a unique arena where institutional and social norms merge with erratic but highly traditional sporting space. While the broader scope of college sports is framed through a predominantly white institution, PWIs, you heard it on this show, we tend to talk about it historically white college universities. The context of differing institutions is often forgotten and misunderstood. The process is primarily evident with minority serving institutions. Historically Black college university, HBCUs, are educational spaces that leverage the historical foundation of missions in an effort to create safe, equitable space for Black students and community members. Traditionally, scholars inquire about HBCUs that focus primarily on exploring and understanding institutional missions and cultures. The dynamic and complex relationships that exist between HBCUs and their collegiate sporting teams continues to be understudied. This study uses a Black liberatory fantasy lens to analyze tweets posted by HBCU students alumni media members from 2013 to 2020. A thematic content analysis of tweets discovered 5 emergent themes that highlight the unique contributions of HBCU sporting space. 1, shifting HBCU narratives. 2, the communal culture of HBCU sports. 3, the HBCU sporting sanctuary. 4, enrichment within the HBCU sporting space. And 5, the Black oppressive nightmare. Implications of this study highlight institutional and cultural specific approaches towards marketing, fan and experience, and broader social discourse. My first question to you, Brother Savon, is what made you decide to do the study in this frame?
So I guess the primary motivation for this, between growing up in Buckeye country, being at University of Pittsburgh for my master's, and Texas A&M for my PhD, I got tired of folks looking at HBCUs through such a negative lens. And I noticed a lot of people, when you talk about college athletics, depending on the program, only certain programs get the shine, they get the glory. But I feel like it's very limited. Basically, if you're not winning or if you're not in that main, quote unquote, mainstream conversation, you really don't get a lot of shine. And I mean, we can even look at that from a class-based perspective. The way people talk about quote unquote mid-majors. There's a lot of mid-major programs that are great. There's a lot of HBCU programs that historically have been great and contemporarily are great. So I wanted to find a way to reposition the way that we talk about HBCUs in a way that we understand it. Because I also believe that our experience when it comes to the athletic realm is significantly different than a historically predominantly white institution. So, you look at, I looked at my experience at Texas A&M. I've been to a football game, been to a basketball game, and a baseball game. I've actually been to a couple for all those sports. And it's very, one level. It's like you're there, you're at an Aggie baseball game, you have a couple traditions. Or you go to a Pitt football game, and, I love my time at Pitt, but even when you have a university that's playing in the Steelers stadium, you lose a little bit of that identity. But, I'm looking back at my time at Winston, it's like, man, game day at Bowman Gray was like a thing. We looked forward to that. The community looked forward to it. People would pull up and tailgate and do all these other things. And it's like HBCUs just offer a little bit more. And I think people need to understand what we offer, but then also why we offer it.
Charles, did you want to jump in there and follow up? I really like when you said that about the thematic process.
Because I was curious, and when I looked at the abstract, implication of the study highlight institutional and cultural approaches towards marketing, fan experience, and broader social discourse. What do you hope to sort of gather from your research? I mean, is this research that athletic directors and boosters can look at and see certain things and that would help enhance their fan experience or their marketing efforts at various HBCUs?
Oh, definitely. I think, I can look at my time at Winston, perfectly. And I need to get it on record, but we're pretty confident that we were one of the first schools, specifically within the CIAA, to have a DJ integrated into our regular game day experience. Mm-hmm. So the music matched what was happening. The fans built off of that. You can look at HBCU game day videos, and we'll play Chief Keef, and then we get hype, and then the away crowd, they get shook up, and then you start to see that spread through the CIAA. And then it got to a point to where this was commonplace. The CIAA, they were able to kind of create that experience. I mean, now it's to the point, if you want to get into a Winston basketball game, you got to pull up early. If you want to get into any CIAA basketball game, you're pulling up early. I think it was my junior year. I had a 7:00 class, and my professor canceled class early or in class early to make sure that we got to the game, because he saw how integral that was to the Winston experience as that became a common thing within our athletic space. But then when you look at like athletic directors, boosters, external folks, I'm really big on intentional marketing and intentional sponsorships and connections. I'm not a fan of organizations just connecting to an HBCU or to an HBCU because it's like the cool thing to do or the trendy thing to do. I look at the track record of the organization. I look at how they market and how they present to different folks. I know, I use this example in class. on how McDonald's, they did the Calvin commercials, trying to cater to the Black community, and Dave Chappelle made a couple jokes about it. But then kind of looking back at it, it's a very coded and very problematic series of commercials when you look at through a 2023 context. And it's like, okay, if we're doing NIL deals for athletes, I want a brand like if we're looking at cosmetics, I know cosmetics has been like a big thing specifically within HBCU NIL deals. It's like, all right, if you're going to partner with HBCU athletes with an HBCU athletic program, I want to make sure that your track record shows that you've been investing in the Black community, that you understand the importance of your product and how that product is used. So, just those types of things. So like people for the external groups, they can definitely have a more intentional approach. And then for athletic leadership, sometimes just making sure that they're embedded into the campus community. They know what students like, they know what community members like, and that they're actually leveraging that and creating and, amplifying that element. And, there's some schools where the tailgate experience is like bar none. I know I know Prairie View, they do a great job when it comes to the tailgate and just how they created that type of experience, that type of environment. And you go on their campus and it's like the same way that A&M, you have people coming in early and setting up and stuff like that. You see that's becoming a norm at PV as well.
How much does the communal culture of HBCU sport sort of dictate how you market that sport? And I say it from this standpoint. Texas A&M and UT, they're rivals. You want to make it uncomfortable if the Longhorns come to College Station, but it's to me it's sort of a unique experience with regards to HBCU sport because it is communal. I mean, I grew up a Jackson State fan, and our rival is Southern. But at the end of the day, I'm still might invite you in. So I'm curious, how does that change sort of the marketing efforts of a school?
Oh, I mean, for that one, I feel like because we have this more familial relationship, the way that we can market, especially now that people are getting more creative on social media, the jabs we can throw at each other, the things that we can do, it doesn't cross a certain line because now it's like, we're cousins. We're cousins from, different sides of the family, or, like my dad was better at basketball than your dad. And then we've kind of just taken on that friendly or familial beef with each other. Like at Winston, HBCU game day, some of our social media pages, like students started making like posters and things like that. And they took a picture of a kid, of an athlete who committed to Winston, but then decommitted and went to our rival. And they blew it up and then turned it into a poster. And, I saw that cycle through social media. And, with that, it's funny, we laugh about it, things like that. It still brings the hype and the intensity for the rivalry. But, for a UT and Texas A&M, it just doesn't hit the same. You're talking trash, you're throwing jabs. But with this one, it's just like, man, when you know a little too much about your cousin, you can really throw some jabs and, make it uncomfortable, but it's still fun at the same time. But then also, thing with the communal culture is that everyone feels represented and everyone feels seen within that particular space. So like that, like looking at like an A&M or a UT, while I was there, I felt like you just had to be an Aggie at the game. Like if you go to HBCU, you have all the different student clubs and organizations. They come up with chants and stuff like that that's specific to them at the game. They may have a couple displays. Like I know we had like our modeling troops. They would come down and, they would do a little quick model walk up and down. They would talk trash. And then depending on the school, if it was close enough, they would bring their modeling troop. And it was like, yo, we're at a basketball game, but the modeling troops are having, their show off. And then, our band and their band and like, our drum line, their drum, like it just goes to so much bigger. Like everyone finds a way to be integrated into that space. And don't let the Greeks get into it because you got one chapter going after another chapter, trying to see who could hop the best, who could stroll the best. Like, and again, that's something like my 4 years at A&M, never saw it. 2 years at Pitt, never saw it. But every HBCU I've gone to, I've seen that whether it's been in totality or it's like, yo, I catch the modeling troops doing their thing one game. One time our choir started singing, like in the middle of a timeout. I'm like, yo, this doesn't happen anywhere else but at HBCU.
I love it, spontaneous. And you're actually right, that community. It's like playing a dozen in your neighborhood, but now you're playing dozens between institutions. And there's a certain way that the rules to playing the dozens that works, that is not something that people from outside of that framework can do. And it just hits differently. Let's go back. That was number 2. Let's go to number 1. shifting HBCU narratives. Tell us a little bit about what that's about.
So that one, I noticed a lot of people, and then, I collected tweets from a pretty decent time frame. So I think I collected tweets from almost a 10-year period.
Yeah.
So
2013 to 2020.
Yeah. So this was basically going through pre-Dion, during Dion, and just seeing how people kind of framed HBCUs, how they were framed in the mainstream beforehand.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
So a lot of folks are talking like, hey, this is the best college basketball game I went to. These football games are some of the best games I've gone to. The Bayou Classic is better than, some of these championship games. And you have folks that, they lived in Atlanta, they lived in areas where they've hosted the college football playoffs. And it's like, yeah, that has the hype and everything around it, but nothing's touching the Bayou Classic. Nothing's touching. So like Winston, we went to the Cleveland Classic. We played Morehouse one year. And for two schools that aren't in Ohio to drive up to Cleveland, you just have a bunch of HBCU folks just all in Cleveland kicking it, whether it's in a casino or just out and about, just all in that entire area. And then we were at the Cleveland Brown Stadium, again, we started doing these things where it's like, you have the turnout, you have the vendors, you have the people showing up, and it's like you don't have to go to a OSU versus Michigan or a game like that to have a great experience. But then also a lot of people devalue HBCU athletic talent. And it's like, clearly we see the talent. There were a lot of tweets about Tariq Cohen. There were a lot of tweets about Jackson State and Grambling and Southern, these historic HBCUs that we wouldn't have the NFL, NBA, any of these major leagues if it weren't for HBCU athletes coming in and building a foundation, and even now still contributing to the talent within the league.
Good stuff. So 5 emerging themes. We've went over 1, shifting HBCU narratives. 2, that Charles asked about, that communal culture of HBCU sports. Let's get on to this third one, the HBCU sporting sanctuary.
Yeah. So, and a lot of this pulled from other people's experiences. They were just saying that, being able to go to the game, be with their friends, once they're part of certain organizations, how they can still go in, have their identity, have their reputation while still cheering on their team, or, even the athletes being a part of it. So, you go to most of these Power 5 PWIs, many athletes are just athletes. They don't really have the freedom or opportunity. The research backs it, that they don't have the freedom or opportunity to join clubs, organizations, be something more than just an athlete and a student in the classroom. So here it's like, man, you got an alpha on the basketball team, and, he dunked. It's not just a basketball player dunking, it's an alpha dunking. And, maybe he's an engineering major, and, you got the Nesby crew getting the hype. So there's more levels to our athletes, and there's more levels to our coaches, more levels to our staff. And then once you're able to see that in that sporting space, that makes a closer connection to you. And I mean, during the off season at Winston, we would have our football players, be in some of the modeling shows and stuff. I have like the big buff dudes and stuff like that as part of their, modeling troop, shows and things like that. And it's like at A&M, I don't think too many of our athletes got called to do other things. At Pitt, I don't think too many of the athletes got called to do other things. And, you go to HBCU, they're a little bit everywhere. If they have the personality to want to be out and about, you're gonna know them. You're gonna have that connection with them.
It makes me think, before we go into thematic number 4 and 5. 4 is one of my ones that I really appreciated and have some connection to, and I want the people to really understand that. But we've talked about the sporting identity, Charles and Savon. It would be interesting to see if we could somehow pull a study together to kind of look at that athletic identity between those that are at HBCUs and those at historically white colleges, because a lot of times that is a problem when you talk about, your athletic identity, particularly for Black, African American, whichever term you want to do, those athletes, and athletes in general, to be fair. But I wonder how unique that is to the HBCU space, because you're allowed in a lot of ways to have multiple identities, even if you play a sport, baseball, basketball. As you said, a perfect example, when a basketball player dunks, people throughout that arena that look like him see his identity multiple ways because of their association with him. Whether, like you said, he's an engineer, so they all in Nesbitt, or he happens to be a part of a Greek organization, or he is a part of a certain major, and what that looks like from a cultural lens Maybe he also is part of a band fraternity, or just the band member in itself, or the choir, as you localize that in many different ways. And that's just a few off the top of the head. So great framework when you talk about having a HBCU sporting sanctuary and how that really looks. Number 4, though, you got into enrichment within the HBCU sporting space.
Yeah.
You know, obviously someone like Charles, Mike, and I, as we do our shows and we come up with these terms to coin it in different ways, I really got excited when I came up and heard about this thematic in terms of HBCU sporting space. And I've heard it in different areas, and you talk about the paper, and we don't necessarily get into that. But at least give us a framework of this enrichment, and I think people will understand why it resonated so much with me.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, like in other research, it shows that HBCU athletes feel like they can do more. They have more academic maturation, more career preparation. They feel more socially embedded in campus. The research shows it, but this one, again, I'm looking at tweets. So I'm looking at what athletes are saying. I'm looking at what coaches are saying. I'm looking at what their classmates and colleagues and people who just attended the institution maybe years before or years after, they're saying like, hey, you know, my coach played football here. He took all of the lessons he learned from, you know, Jackson State or Alcorn, and he integrated that into our high school team. And, you know, like being able to see how you're able to do so much more. It's not just like you're here to play, you know, you're here to play a sport. So we understand that's a responsibility you have, but, you know, we want you to be embedded on campus. We want you to still know your professors. We want you to be able to kind of move and navigate through this space, and just seeing how that's a consistent theme across institution and across time. So again, from 2013 to 2022, you know, 2013, 2020, you have a huge collection of tweets, and they're like, yeah, you know, if you want the total package, if you want to learn, if you want to be part of campus, if you want to, you know, be bigger and better than, you know, who you imagined yourself, how you imagined yourself it could be. And I mean, I think it's really unique getting that narrative or getting, you know, those tweets and those statements from people who weren't athletes. They're like, yeah, you know, basketball player in my class was like one of the best students. You know, those types of things, to where, you know, if you go and you look at some of the other institutions or how athletes have been framed at other institutions, it's like, oh, you know, he's not a good student, the whole dumb jock narrative. And the fact that, you know, that really wasn't a thing that I found within the tweets. It's like everything that I did see that fell within that theme kind of celebrated athletes and celebrated coaches who valued these things. We even had parents who were HBCU grads talking about how they appreciated the HBCU coach talking about grad school and next steps, and, you know, being a GA depending on what program they wanted to do in the relationships they had. And it's like, not saying that doesn't happen at other institutions, but that stands out when you have an HBCU coach talking to an HBCU grad as a parent trying to recruit an athlete, and they're like, hey, these are the things that you can do. These are the things that I'm expecting you to do because of what we offer in our program. You know, you can't, like that's bar none. You can't top that.
That's good stuff.
Let me ask a quick question, Doc. Did the research dictate, or did it change from HBCUs that were on the Division I level to HBCUs that were on the Division II level, or were they was the research similar across the board?
Actually, it was pretty similar across the board. So again, I had tweets from people across the generations who were on social media talking about their time at HBCUs, and even currently, we've had a lot of D1s, a lot of D2s, and it was welcoming to see how consistent it was. That, you know, it's not a particular region, it's not a particular age group. It's like, hey, if you're in an HBCU, you're going to get these experiences. And I really appreciated the parents who are on social media, the older alumni who are on social media who may have graduated early 2000s, 90s, or 80s, and they're saying like, hey, you know, what I experienced in 1985 with this football coach, this tradition has continued, you know, moving forward. Or, you know, just the reinvestment, how, you know, I think it was a former lineman for Southern. He talked about how he just goes back, he just talks to the athletes. He talks to all the linemen. Like, it's just something that he wanted to do. And it's like, man, like those types of things. Those types of things are amazing.
Want to hold you on just one final segment. We'll take a break, come back, and get into the fifth one, and then we'll talk about your previous research. Before we take this break, though, I did want to get into the fact, as you allude to, you also have players that are SGA, that tend to be presidents, state presidents or the council and stuff like that. And you just don't see that. Just last year, Texas Southern University had top 2 summa cum laude in terms of were athletes, happened to be athletes. And he made a comment that he thought maybe Texas Southern was one of the first to do it, certainly across the board. And he was with another athletic director, and they were sharing, and she was saying, yeah, 2 years ago we had one that was summa cum laude. And so it was across that space, and both of them were excited to hear that news. But fascinating when you break it down like that. Man, I'm so glad people had a chance to see this. It's going to juxtapose against number 5. So we'll come back after this break, get into number 5. We'll get ready to close up and ask the final component of your research, and we'll be able to get out of here for the show today. Stick with us after this last break. We'll come back on the other side, close out on some things. Charles
and Associates,
and then we'll close it.
It's a sophisticated and experienced law firm located in your neighborhood. We're turning injury to cash.
T. Madden and Associates obtained almost $2 million for my injury. They turned my injury to cash.
Now, we can't guarantee how much your injury is worth, but we've recovered millions for our clients.
Call T. Madden and Associates at 833-PAID-123. That's 833-PAID-123.
This is Brian Fulford. A.D. Drew and I are co-hosts of the BCSN Sports Wrap. We talk about all things related to HBCU athletics. From the games, teams, coaches, and fan interest stories, we cover it all. You can find our shows on Facebook at BCSN Sports Wrap, YouTube at MyJBN Online, and everywhere you listen to podcasts like Anchor, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can also find the show on the Jericho Broadcast Network's app. Make sure to download. We look forward to you joining the conversation and being a part of the show.
Stride K-12 powered schools are ready to put over 20 years of being a leader in online education to work for you. Dive into curriculum design for the online classroom. Team up with state-certified teachers trained in virtual instruction. Take control of your child's education journey. Discover the power of personalized learning with a leader experienced in preparing kids for a future they can be excited about. Take charge. Stride K-12. Enroll now for the fall.
Press the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they want a law, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. We're talking about You Gotta Be There, a thematic content analysis of historically Black college and university sporting experience, and that is with Dr. Savon Foster. We're into our last thematic approach that came out, was the Black oppressive nightmare. I said it was juxtaposed in a lot of ways to number 4, but really the first 4. But as we come to a close, talk a little bit about the Black oppressive nightmare. What did you mean and what came out in terms of that thematic framework?
Yeah, so first, I felt like it would have been irresponsible to not address the fact that HBCUs historically have been underfunded and they've been under attack by many of their states. Socially, we've seen the discourse go through its ebbs and flows, and I mean, even now, people are questioning the validity or purpose of HBCUs, and even specifically looking at sport, seeing how HBCU athletics have been devalued when Deion took the job at Jackson State. A lot of the negative attitudes kind of surrounding that. And then when he left Jackson State, those attitudes again kind of resurfaced. And even now that he left, because now he's HBCU adjacent, he basically has a target on his back where people are like, oh, are you really good enough to coach at this level? So again, we know that it's here. We know that it's existing. But essentially, this is where people were talking about some of the challenges that they know that HBCUs and at their athletic spaces that they face. Students some of the tweets talked about how HBCUs were unfairly ranked in comparison to other programs when it came to March Madness. In a previous paper, I actually looked at some of the statistics and some of the odds, and we had HBCUs that had better records than Power 5 programs, both in total and within their conference, but they were ranked lower. So when we're looking at like strength of schedule and things like that, that's a very unfair metric that, again, because HBCU conferences are already devalued, in terms of the media and how people assessed, and that creates this larger issue. We're looking at how media members, how they talk about how they frame HBCUs. People notice the difference in knowledge and expertise that people would have, just when it came to filling the air, when it came to, being a sports commentator, talking about, Alabama versus A&M game. But then when Jackson State and Southern, when they're on TV and, they're trying to fill the air, very surface level, very like minimal information that they're using. The bands not being showcased when that's a huge component, people not like the same level of effort. And one of the things that also stuck out was just looking at the expectations. I believe with ESPN now, the streaming responsibility is now on the institution, but there's nothing to fix the gap between institutions in terms of making sure that the stream goes through successfully. So when you're looking at HBCUs that may be in a more rural area where, having the necessary resources and technology to make sure that stream goes through well, ESPN, the technology, the resources, local news stations, technology and resources that could be used as a buffer doesn't exist. But then you look at some of these, historically white colleges and universities, they're getting additional support. They're, getting some of these things. So again, we start to see how all these things that have kind of been structurally set against HBCUs, we see how that basically hurts us within the athletic space. But the main thing is really just looking at how people from the general public, how they would negatively frame HBCUs, and, students having to deal with that, fans having to deal with that. You're out, you're rocking, a shirt from your institution or institution you support, and, people look at you sideways, they make a joke like, oh, you may have went, 8-2, but that doesn't matter. You're at an HBCU. 8-2 there is different than the 8-2 somewhere else. So, those types of things.
Good stuff. Charles, did you have a pause there that you want?
No, that was actually you touched on exactly what it was I was looking at with regards to the number 5, because I was curious about the Black oppressive nightmare thematic framework that you had used. So that was an excellent explanation of that.
Thank you.
With that, as we get ready to close, talked about some of your other research. Maybe people are interested. You had Blacklisted, the college sports landscape, HBCUs, and the theory racialized organizations, published in the Journal of Intercollegiate Sports. Another good one is that was 2022 as well as in 2022. You had The Different World, the Black Reconceptualization of HBCU Athletics, Sociology of Sports Journal. There's and several other ones, but I know that you're about to do another study this fall. Talk a little bit about that, and then we'll give it a close with your framework on what's next for Dr. Foster.
Yeah, so I'm currently working on a project, submitting the paperwork and everything now, but I'll be bouncing around to a couple different HBCUs across the country. I'm going to have a couple homecomings, a couple big games, and just regular season football games. And I want to look at the tailgate experience. Sport management literature overall really doesn't talk about the tailgate experience, but I know that post-COVID, things are different now. So how do HBCUs, how they maintain this culture and tradition? Because, I get on Instagram, I have friends that are a little bit at quite a few different institutions, and I see that there's still this culture and identity of maintaining like what existed while I was in school. So I was at Winston from 2012 to 2016. Being able to go back and still see videos of people at the tailgates or, people coming together, doing a pregame, things like that, that really sticks out. And I know there was, especially during COVID and like right after where people were still a little shaky, the tailgate experience was probably something that people leaned to a little more than, being in the stadium or being in an arena, because you could create a little more space in that environment, bounce from area to area or, just kind of have a different approach to it. But I'm just really looking at how do you maintain tradition? How do you maintain identity and culture after a very rocky 2-year period of limited interaction or, limited opportunity to be around each other. So just kind of seeing like what this new generation, what this new wave of HBCU students are doing to maintain what kind of has been built from generations before.
Man, I love it. Want to be supportive of that. Hopefully have a chance to be a part of that as well. But we're here talking to Dr. Savon Foster, whose research in many areas, but specifically of late HBCU athletics, as you've heard today, college sports culture, college athletic experience and development in terms of some of the things that he's researching at this time. Thank you for listening to Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure you share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. I am Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, the Dean of HBCU Sports, coming from inside the lab in the College of HBCU Sports. Mike Washington, Charles Bishop, up on our time, and our guest, Dr. Savon Foster. Again, we want to thank you for listening to Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop, every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 o'clock. We look forward to next week as we discuss the latest news in the lab. We'll bring you updates. We will have a live show tomorrow here in Norfolk for the MEAC Media Football Day, and that will be at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So those in Central, that's 10 o'clock. Check us out. We should be able to give you a full hour of what it looks like there. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. That's DrKenyattacavil. Make sure you check out our other programs on BCSN. Download my JBN, my BCSN. We will be in Birmingham next Tuesday for the SWAC Media Day. So check us out on our next 2 episodes, which will be live. One here in Norfolk for the MEAC Media Day, and then on Tuesday in Birmingham, Alabama for the SWAC Media Day. Dream big. Continue to move forward. We will talk with you soon. Charles?
Of course.
Lecture.
Avon?
Lecture.
Dismiss.